Welcome back to the Weekend Show. Joining me are Andy Madike, who is a communications consultant, and Temitope Salami, a legislative aide and political strategist. Gentlemen, welcome to the show. Compliments of the season.
Compliments of the season.
Thanks for having me.
Good to have you guys here. So we're reviewing the 2019 budget. First of all, I'd like to start with you, Temitope. Were you at the National Assembly? Because I believe that's where you work daily. But were you at the National Assembly when the President presented the budget to the Joint National Assembly? And what is your reaction to the booing, the cheering, the mixed reactions from parliamentarians regarding the 2019 budget?
Well, thank you very much, Osasu. I was at the National Assembly, but obviously I was at my office at the time of presentation of the budget by the President, as I did not have clearance to be in the chamber. But we could watch it live on TV, the process of presentation of the budget. It is not news that this is unusual in the history of the National Assembly to see a Commander-in-Chief presenting the budget and then to find parliamentarians booing on the one side and then jeering on the other side as he reeled out the estimates for 2019. But I have read a lot of reactions from Nigerians, both on social media, on the pages of our dailies, and group discussions I've had in the last couple of days. A lot of people have condemned the parliamentarians for their actions. Some other people have said, well, it's in order. Some have said it's a show of immaturity, which you do not expect from lawmakers at that level of government. I however, beg to differ in the sense that in as much as we might have these divergent views as to why what they should have done and the need for decorum on the day the budget was presented, I think it is just an amplification of the thoughts of Nigerians regarding the economy right now. I want Nigerians to also realize this point, that lawmakers are elected to represent constituencies. They are not just some political figures who just wound up at the National Assembly to do their biddings and then, do whatever they think they do. They represent constituencies, and there are a lot of demands from their constituents. There are a lot of pressures from their constituents to see them do the things or to relay or amplify their feelings regarding how government has performed from 2015. In particular. So when you see the reactions, particularly from the opposition members, saying lies and booing the president when he reeled out some of his estimates.
No, it's not true. Some of them didn't act as we would expect parliamentarians to act. We do have to admit at least that. But let's horn into the issue of the budget. The total 2019 budget as proposed is 8.8 trillion.
That's correct.
The non-debt recurrent expenditure is 4.04 trillion. Debt service 2.14 trillion. Statutory transfer 492.36 billion, and capital expenditure 2.031 trillion. Andy, when you hear these figures, I know the 2018 budget was only implemented 50% of that.
Yes.
When you hear these figures, do you believe that we're running a proper budgetary system in Nigeria?
So my first problem with the budgetary system in Nigeria is the time when it is presented and the time it takes for it to be passed. And if you recall, the last budget took about 6 months before the National Assembly were able to pass it. And also going based on the fact that we've been speaking about zero budgeting, it's pretty much an estimate if we're speaking realistically. So it's an estimate on what the government intends to do and how they plan to spend the money. But I feel we take too long in preparing the budget and the process of getting it passed, to the point that at the end of the day we'll have 25 to 50% completion, and what happens is that the common man suffers as a result of this. And so we now have a situation where at the end of the year, as opposed to projects being completed, we are hearing them being commissioned to start. And let's also be honest that we're entering an election year. So it's not exactly realistic for us to have such estimations at this point in time, because there are the questions of transparency, there are the questions of will these monies actually be used for what they are meant for, but we need to get the timing of presenting the budget and passing it into law. We need to get that right for us to be able to have an effective budget for Nigerians.
Tell me, talk about you working in the National Assembly.
That's
You
correct.
said you weren't at the presentation, but
Yes,
you
I
were
wasn't.
watching from your office. Does this budget give you hope that in the light of the prevailing economic challenges, the high rate of unemployment with the news figures released by the NBS, does this budget give you hope for 2019 that we can not only lift people out of poverty, but we will reduce the unemployment rate with this budget?
Well, thank you very much, Sam, for that question. Before I take on answering the question, I would like to revisit the history of the budget cycle in Nigeria a little bit.
Oh, we've got a budget historian. So we started with a
Christmas
Christmas historian,
historian,
so we've got a budget
budget
historian.
We must realize that from the turn of the Fourth Republic in 1999, we've had the issue of the budget in Nigeria has been a major concern. Save for 2003, I think, when the president was able to submit the budget before the end of the fiscal year, and the budget got passed before the end of the fiscal year. Every other year up until now, what we've had is an overlap of the budget cycle. And there are a lot of challenges that comes with that. Now, I'll take this for example. Ideally, there's supposed to be a relationship between the private sector and the public sector. And the private sector relies on the public sector through the budget to determine what its prospects and its propositions will be for the new fiscal year. But what we have with this recurrent overlap is a situation where you have private sector operators who do not know what the outlook is for the new year at the turn of the new year, and it's very difficult to them to project and to go about their businesses. Also, you have foreign investors who are not sure of what to expect as a result of the fact that budget cycles are not as it should be. Ideally, fiscal year should start in January and terminate in December. But what we have is a situation where our fiscal year starts at mid-year, perhaps May or June, and then terminates in May or June of the following year. And then it also doesn't help the fact that the Constitution allows the government, the federal government, to spend as much as 6 months into the new fiscal year, so long as it's not more than what was spent in the previous year. But this doesn't help us. It hurts economic development over time.
Would it be safe to conclude that it doesn't give you hope?
No, it doesn't give me hope.
Andy, what do you think?
I think it doesn't give anybody hope, to be honest, because we're at a point where, and this is also a reflection of what you saw at the National Assembly on Thursday at the budget presentation, people voted this government in based on the word hope, expecting to see a lot of things change. Being a young person, passionate about young people, seeing unemployment figures rising, it makes young people question, so what happens to the amount of money being put into infrastructural development, into capital projects? Those are meant to increase jobs for people. And so if more people are losing jobs and more people are entering the job market, then it makes you question what other sectors are we not getting right because of such inconsistencies. So hope's out of the question at this point in time, but we all wish for the best and believe that we want the best for Nigeria for this to be implemented.
I love the way he actually ended.
Honestly.
He ended with a ray of hope.
Let's hope. Although I don't have any hope, let's hope. But you see,
I have hope.
I think do you have hope, Samson?
I have hope.
Okay.
And the reason why I have hope is the level of citizens' awareness is increasing.
Yes, it is.
There's no government in the world that comes to tell you, you know what, I am going to, I have everything it takes to address your problems. Yeah. Or even if they've got good intentions. But we've got a system that is deeply entrenched with every form of malgovernance or corruption, or even look at the quality of public leadership in the country. But it behoves on citizens. And this is where citizens play a critical role, and how the media and citizens work together to pressure government and pressure the leaders that we voted into power to perform their statutory responsibility. That lies hope. So for me, it's whether citizens will pick this budget, dissect the budget, ask fundamental questions like we're asking now, and then begin to hold different agencies of government as well as their leaders responsible. That is where hope lies. And if we put pressure on them, then they will have no choice but to be responsive.
But do you believe, despite the pressure we put on politicians, especially the parliamentarians now, do you believe that this budget can really pass before the 2019 election?
Come on.
Is there a possibility?
Come on.
Thank you.
That's-
Thank you. So it's like we have hope, but what is the reality on the ground?
No, but
I'm all for being hopeful, but it's not a reality that this budget cycle right now, because the budget cycle actually has to expand a year. So for those people who are saying they want to see it implemented before June, it's practically not possible.
But we need to keep in mind that we've got a subsisting budget that will end in June next year.
Yeah.
All right.
That's
So
right.
we do have a budget. And so even if this budget is passed, it's probably going to start from July, six months into the year. So we've altered our budget cycle. And that's what the constitutional review that the National Assembly undertook was meant to address. And there's a bill before the president now to assent to reverse this cycle. But I think beyond the cycle is actually about budget implementation. There's no doubt that on this particular budget that was presented, there are several gaps. We've not seen the fiscal strategy paper. We've not even seen MTEF. You've got crash in oil prices. And so even look at the benchmark.
Barrel,
so there are a couple of issues, no doubt. We have historically run a budget of deficit. So we've got a fundamental problem that we need to address, and how do we reverse it? And that's where when you heard the booing, and quite frankly, I hold a different view around what happened in the National Assembly. If you understand the parliament very, very well, across the world, this is how parliamentarians behave. This is it's conventional practice, excuse me, for parliamentarians to act in that manner. My only concern is, and where I worry, is the fact that Buhari is a constitutional construct. He is a creation of a constitution. He represents Nigeria as the president. It is the office of the president and not the individual. And it is very, very important. And if you look at Americans, as much as they disagree with Trump, but when the president, because we practice a presidential system of government, it's not parliamentarianism. If you look at the British Parliament, if Theresa May is speaking, you can see how the Parliament in UK. But when you operate a presidential system of government, he's the chief. He's the head of government. So
Nigerians should bow down.
No, it's not bow down. It's respect for the institution. You may not like President Buhari, but don't disagree with his position that he holds. It's very, very
So are you
appreciated.
for or against the parliamentarians' approach towards his 20?
No, quite frankly, I will focus more on the fundamentals of the budget and the fact that what is the reality.
But you know, when he was reading his statistics of what the government has done, that's the issue that was actually brought the boost, because he said he had implemented testing policies and did some infrastructural development. Then I heard one parliamentarian, it's a lie.
Lies.
So, I mean, they have issues with what he's talking about, the infrastructural development that he claims to have done.
And to amplify what Sasu just mentioned, in the last couple of days, we've seen a lot of videos on social media showing actual projects that have been listed by the president as ongoing or near completion that have that nothing has been done completely, particularly in the south-east axis of the country. So I'll slightly disagree with Sam in the sense that if you look at the Westminster Parliament, for example, the UK Parliament, particularly on this issue of the Brexit and Theresa May's party, the Conservative Party, you could see when the Prime Minister is addressing Parliament, you could see other parliamentarians who do not agree with her ideals respond and react. Whether it's the Prime Minister or it's the Chancellor of the Exchequer who is addressing them, they react. So in a sense, you're right by saying it is the culture and nature of parliamentarians to react when, so whether or not he's the commander-in-chief or he represents the executive arm of government, if you come before the hallowed chamber of the National Assembly to present, in quote, false realities to them, it behoves on them to react in the way they did.
No,
and
not in the way they did. There's a proper procedure for doing that.
It also does. Obviously, we have proper parliamentary procedures.
You can disagree.
You know the fact that in Nigeria today, there's this sense of immunity around the president. The sense that he's not really exposed to what happens outside of the four walls of the villa and everything. So I think one thing that action elicited in the president was show to him that he doesn't have this air of supremacy that he appears to carry around, that people will actually respond.
Challenge
people are
him.
unhappy
And
with
I
the way.
think, and I think it's a growing phenomenon in our society, because a lot of Nigerians were quiet at a point, and only recently, as the 2019 general elections draws closer, Nigerians are coming out and speaking out against public servants,
Exactly.
their leaders. And it's not a culture that we're very accustomed to.
True.
So I think it would take a while for our leaders to actually adjust to this. But I believe personally that it's a good thing. I think that it's our right as citizens, as the employers of these public servants, to demand from them accountability at all times. The method we use in doing that, I think, matters as well.
Yeah.
Nonetheless, I think that Nigerians, it's laudable that we're speaking out now and demanding more from our leaders. But Andy, I'll give you the last word. I'll give you the last word in terms of the 2019 budget. Samson asked earlier if this budget brings any hope to Nigerians. Given the unemployment rate has increased now to 20, I believe 20.9 million. It has risen to 20.9 million from 17.6 million. The government claims it's been creating jobs, creating an enabling environment. Do you believe that this 2019 budget, do you see the possibility of this 2019 budget creating more jobs and alleviating poverty in our society?
So no, I do not, and I'll speak especially from the point of unemployment. And so some people have alleged that our population has grown, and that's why there are more people in the labor market. But when you compare that to the jobs created and the largely touted N-Power and, say, rice farmers, if we are being realistic, if the population is increasing, our budget shouldn't be reducing. So we shouldn't be trying to play to the gallery saying, oh, we've even reduced the amount because we want to show that we are saving money for the country, want to show that we're being frugal. You're meant to be able to increase some of these things, ideally, so that it would work for the masses, because it should be realization that the previous one hasn't worked. And it even makes more sense now that we can now hold our leaders accountable. We even know more about the budget now than we knew 6 years ago. So in the last 5 years, Nigerians have learned more about budget items which relates to them. And once this is released, there's a breakdown where people pick on certain areas. So what are we doing about education? What are we doing about science and technology? So if we are talking about diversification and recovery, we're talking about primary health centers. Where is it stated in the budget? And how does this actually affect Nigerians? When you talk about infrastructure as well, and you bring in foreign partnerships, what agreements do you have put in place saying Nigerians should be, 70% of the workforce should be Nigerians? We don't have that stated out for us. And so we have the contractors at liberty to do what they want and bring people in.
But we do have the local content law.
Yes, we do, but we always talk about implementation. When it comes down to implementation, he who pays the piper dictates the tune. So if I'm loaning you money to come and implement a project for you, I pretty much decide. And so the figures actually should tally with the most recent figures, which is why it's even a bit unfair that most of the statistics, like with unemployment again, coming out now, is a bit too late, because that should have been taken into account when this budget was being prepared. And so what we will now have is more push on the private sector to work based on this to create more jobs. But the government also has a role to play.
Awesome. That's a fine place to leave it. Andy, Temitokwe, I see you want to say something.
Yeah,
30 seconds. 30
I'll just
seconds.
like to tie into what Andy just said. We've also, like Sam equally mentioned, we've had a system of running deficit budgets over the years. What we can do, like he said, is to get the government to create policies to increase economic activity. It's very obvious. Explain to the gallery, that's true, that you're reducing the budget from the previous year. But what we need to do is, because we have population increase and we have more people getting into the labor market, you need to increase economic activity by creating an enabling environment for small and medium scale entrepreneurs to work and create more jobs for people to be able. So, I mean, it's okay that the budget is on an incremental basis. The only thing that needs to be done is that we need to expand the economy to ensure that we can get more in revenue. Every time we do a projection and then we never meet our revenue, the revenue profile is never met on a yearly basis. So it tells us that it's a fundamental problem. We need to diversify the economy and, in truth, not just word of
Well,
mouth.
words,
We need to ensure that we can get money from other sources.
I can't
to
tell you how
increase.
many times I've heard diversifying the economy. We need to take that from words and actually put it into action.
action.
Thank you so much, Emi Tokpe and Andy, for coming on the program.
Thanks for having me.
We'll take a break right now. When we return, more on the Weekend Show. Don't go anywhere.